The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Mary set out, and she went as quickly as she could to a town in the hill country of Judah. She went into Zechariah's house and greeted Elizabeth. Now, as soon as Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. She gave a loud cry and said, "Of all women, you are the most blessed, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. Why should I be honored with a visit from the mother of my Lord? For the moment your greeting reached my ears, the child in my womb leapt for joy. Yes, blessed is she who believed that the promise made her by the Lord would be fulfilled." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
It wasn't any of our readings today, but in the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, he says, "We do not have eyes for the visible, but only for the invisible." Having eyes for the visible and for the invisible. Now, we all have eyes for the visible. We can all, well, most of us here, I suppose, can see. And we can see what is to be seen, what is visible. He says, but we'd have eyes not for the visible, but for the invisible. Eyes for the invisible. It's a contradiction, but we know that he means the spiritual eyes, as it were, to be able to know and to trust in life and life everlasting, to trust in God, to have faith in God, whom we can't see as such in a person, but who we know is there because our eyes of faith tell us. But unfortunately, just like our human eyes that sometimes can't see the invisible so well, sometimes, our spiritual eyes can't see the invisible so well either. And we sometimes, we fail to recognize the hand of God, or to sometimes even to believe in God. In today's readings, we have a lot of talk about joy and exulting, and well, we would be considered mad if we obeyed what Zephaniah said. Shout for joy. Israel, shout for joy. Rejoice, exult with all your heart. He will exult with joy over you, a victorious warrior. He will dance with shouts of joy. And then in the gospel again, we hear Elizabeth's joy at seeing Mary, and even John the Baptist leaping with joy in the womb of Elizabeth. All this joy, of course, is because, well, first, yes, there's joy with Elizabeth because there's a child or children to be expected. But I think it's a little bit more than that. They have eyes for the invisible, and they know that God is at work. So Elizabeth can see beyond merely a pregnant girl in front of her. She can believe that God is at work. Blessed is she who believed that the promise made her by the Lord would be fulfilled. And Zephaniah too, all can see the invisible and can see God and know that God is at work. Of course, we are called in this Christmas time to, well, I suppose all the time, but in this Christmas time, to have eyes for the invisible and to believe that God has so loved us that the Word became flesh for us and lived among us. And to believe that God so loved us that He formed and fashioned this moment for our sake. Shout for joy is our response, I suppose, when we recognize this, when we have eyes for the invisible and recognize what it is we are celebrating, this great love of God in which the Word becomes flesh for us, this great love of God in which God becomes one like us and lives among us for our sake. And then when we have eyes for this, then we can truly enter into the spirit of Advent, the spirit of Christmas, whatever season it is, to know that we celebrate the absolute love of God. And when we have eyes for the invisible, to recognize that God is at work in all of this, then we can exult, then we can shout for joy, then we can shout aloud, rejoice, exult with all our hearts, because we're seeing beyond the visible to the invisible. At Christmas time, when Christmas Day approached, Christmas and Christmas season, we celebrate in its fullness this great act of God and the Word becoming flesh. But we truly have to have eyes for the invisible and to see beyond the visible and to recognize that God is at work in ways that are beyond our imagination. And to know that the God who worked like that in the incarnation works continually in our lives. And therefore our lives should always have that underlying joy. We may not always feel like jumping up and shouting aloud and so on, but always have that underlying joy because we know that God is at work, because we have eyes for the invisible.